How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. We just had very hot CPI come in, meaning it came in higher than expected. Inflation is higher than analysts thought. Core CPI was higher as well. And we talk about how this is such a bad thing for risk-on assets, high volatility assets like Bitcoin and maybe tech stocks. The fact is, this is actually the reason why we buy Bitcoin in the first place. This is actually good for Bitcoin holders long term. I want to explain why that is, why we can actually beat Wall Street with investments, why it matters to look past the current month, the current quarter, and look at years into the future where things are going to be. And when we get data like this, it just incentivizes people to buy Bitcoin long term. So let's talk about that. A little bit of a different video. We're also in a different spot than usual, but watching the baby again. The baby did not sleep well, so I'm giving the wife a little bit of time off to sleep in a little bit. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video as well. By the way, there are links underneath the video to BTCC, to WEEX, to Blofin, BTCC, CoinW. They all have different sign-up bonuses. I would suggest going and signing up for like 2 of them. It's good to have multiple exchanges, even outside of like the typical exchanges like maybe Coinbase or Binance. It's good to have other exchanges because some of the time these exchanges manipulate. Coinbase goes down at weird times. So you want backups. You want to be able to possibly leverage trade as well. So if you want to check these out, there's no KYC. You can get started underneath the video, and there are special sign-up bonuses, lower fees with some of those links. So definitely sign up underneath. And there's also a link to Patreon as well in case you want some exclusive videos and to know what I'm doing a little bit more on the trading side, which we haven't made any trades in the last week or two, but we're just waiting right now. Now, we got, like I said, we got higher than expected CPI and core CPI. I believe CPI came in 0.1% year over year higher than expectations, and core CPI came in 0.2%. Sorry, trying to do this from memory, but both of them came in hotter than expected. Automatically, the S&P 500 dropped 1%. Bitcoin dropped as well. And it's such an interesting reaction. We've talked about why this is, right? It makes really good sense why this happens in the short term, because when inflation is higher than expected, it leads people to think that the Fed's less likely to lower interest rates because that could create more inflation, right? They have a mandate to try to get inflation down to 2%. Because of this, because of the delay in rate cuts, we see Treasury yields jump up. So now you can get a higher APY on risk-off assets. So there's just this repricing, right? If you can get 4% risk-free versus 5%, more people are going to rotate into treasuries when they can get 5%, right? Versus 4%, versus 3%. So it makes sense short-term why this is. But that's where people stop a lot of the time. And I have to remind myself of this too. These exact prints where we see higher than expected inflation, these are why we like Bitcoin in the first place. This is why Bitcoin's valuable. This is why people turn to Bitcoin. If the Fed had perfect prints, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, and you had this kind of expectation and expectation met reality where you only ever have perfect equal amounts of inflation every single month. There was never any greed. There was never any stupid decision made by the government to increase the money supply. If this was the case, we wouldn't have to rely on Bitcoin so much to preserve our purchasing power, right? Because it'd be really easy to determine, okay, well, I can get 3%, inflation's 2%, I'll always get 1% real increase to purchasing power in a treasury yield, for example, or a savings account. I can get, on average, maybe 8% better in the stock market. That's not the case, though. If that was the case, Bitcoin, I don't think would be quite as valuable, right? What is the case is we have no idea what governments are going to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like, we don't know what they're going to do next month. We don't know what politicians are going to put forward a bill that gets voted on because people want to get extra votes in the next election, or they want to help out their buddies, so they're willing to pay insane amounts for government contracts. We know that politicians generally are greedy. Generally, they make bad decisions, or at least maybe not all of them, but enough do that we have, we have inflation that spikes up over time. We have even just normal mistakes, right? Like misreadings of the market. It's impossible to forecast everything perfectly moving forward. And that's why we Bitcoin. So when we see a high inflation print like this, yes, Bitcoin might fall down short term, but that's a great thing about being a retail investor. You don't have to get returns in the next month, in the next 6 months, in the next 2 years. Like you can focus on the long term. And really what a lot of Wall Street investors do is focus on maybe this 3-month period, maybe even monthly, depending on how they report, but mostly 3-month period and then year-end period. So they're focused on getting returns in this very short time span. So they're trying to get in and out when it's obvious that Bitcoin wins long-term if we have inflation, because people realize that they need to preserve purchasing power. And this brings more people into Bitcoin, right? How does Bitcoin do well? Well, either more people go and buy Bitcoin, or the people that already own Bitcoin buy more of it. And I think it's pretty obvious that in a high inflation environment, people look at Bitcoin and they think, oh man, I probably should preserve my purchasing power. And whether they already own Bitcoin or not, they get pulled to want to buy Bitcoin. And then it's just a case of like, well, do you want to buy right now? Are you focused on the short term? Like, do I think it's going to pump because of monetary policy? Or do I want to wait a little bit because maybe I can get a slightly higher yield with treasuries right now? But most likely you are looking at things that can outperform, that can do well long term. And maybe you just wait a little while to allocate, but it brings people to want Bitcoin, like I said before. We also continue to see more and more people buy Bitcoin. There's a new group of people that bought Bitcoin. I'll talk about that in a second. But just last thing on the inflation front, we do have the market now pricing in the next rate cut, not being in September, but being in December. So be ready for some volatility. This is where I say, I like trading. I like having the ability to lever up for big swings, because we're going to see volatility. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of volatility. Like I go to bed and Bitcoin's within $500 of the price that was last night. That's not going to be the case. We're going to get to a time where it's either dropping thousands of dollars or it's spiking up thousands of dollars. And it's just a question of, who gives out first, the sellers or the buyers. But we have a lot of big entities buying Bitcoin right now that look like they want to allocate more and more. And there's still a lot of entities that are getting approval to buy Bitcoin. I mean, look at all the states that are trying to buy Bitcoin. Are they going to stop their plans to buy Bitcoin because the Fed's cutting in December instead of September? No, they're still trying to get this passed to go buy Bitcoin. They don't really care about a 3-month period. They're not hedge funds. They don't worry about 3 months. They worry about the next 3 years, 30 years, right? So focus on that. Focus on the people that are still trying to get allocation to Bitcoin, because that is changing. Now, what I just saw, and again, I'm trying to do this from memory, on Little Sleep, I think it was the Wyoming Highway Commission is going to buy Bitcoin, like another big institution. I believe it's their pension plan. We see more and more pensions buying Bitcoin, and it makes sense. They, like I said, they have long-term outlooks. They're worried about preserving purchasing power. That's really what they're there for. They are trying to make sure that the people that invest and save through the pensions can actually get inflation-adjusted returns and hopefully beat inflation over time. I think a lot of pensions have done a poor job of that. A lot of them are underfunded. They've gotten poor returns over time. So now they have to go a little bit more aggressive, right? Or slowly die. As Michael Saylor said, right? His company was either going to slowly die or quickly die unless they did something very drastic. So they went out and bought Bitcoin. Now, we continue to see Michael Saylor, BlackRock, these entities continue to stack more and more Bitcoin. Again, it's just wild to think about where Bitcoin could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And I know, I make videos every day. We all watch the charts. We pick up on the news because we are really interested and we believe strongly in crypto or in Bitcoin. But sometimes that can be a bit of a detriment. So I think that's why it's important to remember, like, again, when inflation numbers come out like this, all roads lead to Bitcoin. If inflation comes in lower than expected, okay, monetary policy changes, and then more people want to buy Bitcoin because it makes more sense from a risk-adjusted return perspective. When inflation comes in higher than expected, well, again, it brings more people into Bitcoin because screw inflation, screw the U.S. government. They are ruining they're ruining a lot of people's lives by not allowing them to preserve purchasing power. And a lot of people don't save. A lot of people don't invest. So they have to go out and they have to make 3% more this year just to preserve purchasing power. And keep in mind, this is the government reported numbers. They manipulate these. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. Does it help to get kind of like this longer term perspective again? Because I think a lot of people, they just point out, oh, Bitcoin's falling because inflation came in higher than expected. This is bad for Bitcoin. But they don't really think about the long term. Let me know your thoughts. Again, you can check out the links underneath the video to WEEX, BTCC, CoinW, Blofin, and BitUnix. All of these are great platforms. Again, I like using multiple platforms. They offer different services. They offer slightly different trading tools. So definitely check that out. If you want to ask, myself questions or Joe, who's been in the market for 10 years buying crypto, you can check out the Patreon underneath the video. Also, I feel like there's something else I was going to say. Let me know what you're drinking right now. I just had a coffee, feeding the baby some food as well. Let me know what you're drinking. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.